Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen. On this episode, we get to have Mark Gerson. Mark's going to talk to us about a bunch of interesting things, growing large businesses, helping in charity, and especially his new book. Mark, before we jump into the book, can you tell us about the organizations? Maybe tell us a little bit about what did businesses do, kind of give us some stats on how big they are, tell us about the charities, and then let's jump into the book.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Jess. It's such an honor to be here. Yes, I've started a couple businesses. The first business was Gerson Group, GLG. We started it in 1998. And our clients are many of the major hedge funds, mutual funds, private equity firms, venture capital firms, lots of companies and professional services firms. And they come to us when they need expertise, when they need to learn something, often pursuant to an investment decision or a business decision. And then around 3 years ago, I co-founded and I chair 3I Members, which is a community of private investors to share non-correlated, high-yielding deal flow, do collective diligence, and be in community with each other for all kinds of purposes, both commercial and otherwise. And I'm also the co-founder and chairman of two philanthropic organizations, United Hatzalah of Israel, which is Israel's crowdsourced system of volunteer first response. We now have 8,000 volunteer medics throughout the country and do around 2,300 emergency calls a day. And also African Mission Healthcare, which I co-founded in 2010, which partners with Christian missionary physicians at Christian hospitals in Africa to provide clinical care for the poor, build infrastructure, do training, and sometimes hospital administration. And then I'm also the co-chairman with Dan Ock of Eagle's Wings, which is a parachurch ministry of Christian Zionists and 5 Semites. And we send pastors on a 12-day trip to Israel and then sustain them in a Zionist and 5 Semitic community when they return. So, and then my book, God Was Right, How Modern Social Science Proves the Torah is True, came out last week. That's
exciting. So let's go back to the expert network for a minute. The last stat I saw, I think, was 2021, $650 million in revenue. It sounds like you guys are north of that now. For people to get a little more of an insight, can you give us an example of, the kind of expert and the kind of client and what a contract like that looks like?
Yeah, so the client might be an investment firm or a consulting firm or a corporation or really anyone seeking to make a better business or investment decision. And they might want to learn something that will help them make that decision. So if it's a healthcare investor, they might want a survey of doctors to see who's prescribing the drug and why. I mean, there are all kinds of use cases. Basically, any kind of investment or business decision is, like any decision in life, is better made with more knowledge. And so what we realized in the late 90s and have developed ever since is that there are lots of people with knowledge on one side of a marketplace and lots of people who need knowledge on the other, and we connect them.
Yeah, and is that primarily hourly? Is that a subscription? What's the business model there?
Oh, the business model. It could be a mixture of all kinds of things at this point. Yeah, so it's some subscription, some non-subscription, and yeah.
Yeah. So who are some of your higher profile experts?
Oh, we have about 1 million experts. So yeah, could we just go back for I mean, there are just so many. I don't know if this would be. I mean, it's not like
just giving us the taste of an example of is it somebody people have heard of?
Yeah, I mean,
experts such a subjective term, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so being asked to name, a few experts. I mean, what we realized is that so many people have expertise in such a wide variety of areas, and so many people have knowledge to share. So it's really not a matter of, a well-known expert or a famous expert, because so many people have derived knowledge and expertise from all kinds of things that they do, and it's valuable to those who want to learn those things to make better business or investment decisions.
Yeah, interesting. So talk to us about the premise of the new book.
So the premise of the new book is called God Was Right, How Modern Social Science Proves the Torah is True. And the premise of the book is that the Bible is not a history book or a science book or a cookbook, but it's a guidebook. And as a guidebook, it makes all kinds of claims about the most practical decisions, challenges, opportunities that we face on a daily basis. And these decisions could be anything from how many times should I go out with the girl or the boy before I get married, to what kind of clothing should I wear in the morning, to how much should I give to charity. And these questions are totally practical, always relevant, and always interesting. And so in God Was Right, I wanted to try to assess, is the biblical guidance true? Is it false? Or is the Bible just a good book where the guidance is true in some places and maybe not so true in other places? So for 3,000 years, all people had to go by to make that assessment was faith and experience. And now for the first time, we have an additional tool, and that's modern social science. So what I did in the book was I tested the biblical claims, the biblical guidance on several dozen subjects against what the social science says. And what I discovered is that the Bible is absolutely right in everything it says. And therefore, no matter what religious orientation we come from, or no religious orientation at all, as a guidebook, indeed as a self-help book, the Bible has earned our study and our devotion, our followership. And it's just the best text ever to both simplify and guide all of life's decisions.
Yeah. So let's talk about principles. I know we talked about this chapter of the giving advantage for businesses. Can you maybe dive into that one?
Yeah, sure. Jess, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a really counterintuitive notion in the Bible, but the Bible asserts the following with quite a degree of confidence. So in Deuteronomy 15:10, Moses says, if you give, essentially the quote is, if you give, or the citation is, if you give generously and enthusiastically to the poor, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings, which is an astonishing claim for a couple of reasons. First, the Bible never makes guarantees because the Bible doesn't want to be an ATM machine where if you put in a code, you get out a certain result. There'd be no notion of faith if that was the case. So this is a guarantee, but the Bible doesn't make guarantees. The other is it's totally against the whole idea of what one would think happens when one gives. So, Jess, if I gave you this bottle of soda, I would have one less and you would have one more. That's kind of just the nature of giving things, the nature of exchange. But what the Bible says is that when it comes to giving to the poor, that doesn't apply. What the Bible says is that if you give to the poor, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings. And all of your undertakings are specifically and without a doubt material. So the Bible is saying the more you give to the poor, the richer you're going to be. So totally counterintuitive notion for a few reasons. But the Bible doubles down on it because in the book of Malachi, I think it's Malachi 3:10, the prophet says exactly the same things. He just uses the word storehouses, but it's exactly the same concept. So there's a lot of confidence both in the Bible and in the prophetic interpretation of it that this is true, that the more we give generously and enthusiastically to the poor, the wealthier that we'll become. Then I asked the question, well, is this true? Has modern social science confirmed this or refuted it? And the literature shows that it's absolutely true. The literature is very clear that, and this is from all kinds of social science studies, that those who are charitable are likely to turn 100 into something like 375 rather than 275. I mean, it's a very significant delta. And then the question is, why is it true that those who give more become wealthier? Because you would think that those who don't give but save and invest more, they will be the ones who become wealthier. But it's not the case. It's those who give more who become wealthier. And then I realized, and this is again supported by the literature, but I've seen it firsthand in my chairmanship and of two charities and co-chairmanship of another, how charitable giving works is that very few people go to the internet and type in a cause and just give to an organization that comes out. People give in community. So what are the implications of that for growing one's wealth? Well, if you're in a charitable community, that means that you're alongside others who agree that the thing that you hold sacred is also sacred. You're in a community of others who are also giving to and sacrificing for and believing in the same thing. So when it comes time to doing business, when it comes time, and it could be anything from hiring a plumber or a carpenter or an attorney or an investment manager or whatever it is, who are you going to rather do business with? Someone in your charitable community who believes in the same thing you do and who will give to the same cause that you believe in when he's successful with your help, or some random person you met at some party or got some introduction or on the internet or whatever. Of course, you'd rather work with the person in your charitable community. And I think that's one of the ways that explains, and there are several others I list in the book, but that's one of the ways that explains why those who give become wealthy.
Interesting. So I totally agree with it, and I've experienced it. But for maybe people who haven't been as in depth in it, what are some of these sources that you're citing for the literature?
Oh, it's the sources that I cite throughout the book are usually university social science sources. Sometimes social science sources, but outside university, but most of them are university based. In terms of giving, it's university based social science sources, as well as, it's very interesting. The literature of personal finance has, and there are several examples of this, and I cite them in the book, catalog all of the ways that people hit financial problems or get into financial trouble. And what I found is that not a single one of them cites giving too much to charity. So these lists can be exhaustive. They can cite all kinds of things, but not a single one cites giving too much to charity.
Yeah. So I don't know, Harvard, some university that's doing a study. What's, for people who don't know what that looks like, what's an example of the kind of study they would do?
In giving or in general, because there are
specifically with this subject matter.
Oh, well, with giving, what you would do is you would take a cohort of people who are highly charitable, take a cohort of people who aren't, and see over one particular period of time who does better, assuming that the cohort's the same.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated in this subject. I believe in this subject. I want to believe this subject is true. Tell us about some of your experience or some of the ways that's shown up for you in your businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I've had these personal experiences, and but I think they're not unique to me. I mean, I think everyone engaged in charitable communities has seen that. And Jess, I'm sure you've seen it with the work you've done against child trafficking. I mean, by the way, what an incredible cause you're devoted to. I've learned about that relatively recently and how prevalent it is and how ubiquitous it is so God bless you for that work. But those of us who are engaged in charitable communities, we develop bonds of affection and bonds of trust with the others who are in that community. And in developing those bonds and affections and bonds of trust, you'd always rather do business with somebody that you like and respect and trust than with someone who just got a referral from what the sociologists call a loose tie. So yeah, I've seen it firsthand, is that many of our closest friends, many of the people that I do business with most frequently and most enthusiastically are those who I've met and engaged with through the charities that I chair.
Yeah, I have said, if I hadn't started child rescue, I should have, for business reasons. Like, that's not why I started it. It's not why I do it. But like 16 years later, like, there's so many times where it's like I became friends with someone, or I got to know someone, or I barely met someone, and for whatever reason, years have gone by, and my relationship with them was primarily business wise. And so often I'll see them again 5 years later, or we'll be getting back together for some business reason, like 7 years later. And I would say, without a doubt, the number one question I get is, "Hey, are you still doing the counter trafficking stuff?" It's just like,
wow.
It's kind of like my identity to like a lot of my community. When sometimes I'm like, I would like some credit for my business acumen, but so often what they remember about me is the child rescue stuff.
Well, I think it's because it's so distinctive. I mean, I think there are three legitimate uses for philanthropy. One is alleviating pain, one is saving lives, and one is creating opportunities for the poor. And I mean, with the depths and the scale at which you're doing all three, I mean, particularly alleviating pain and saving lives, Jess, I mean, you've helped so many people. I mean, I just know how severe that causes, and that problem is, so I'm not surprised at all that's what you're known for, and you should be proud to be known for that.
Well, it's my wife would have been a fifth generation trafficking victim had her mom not broken the cycle. So
Wow.
it's so close for home. It's so hard to forget about. We're, you still have like multi-generational trauma, and like,
Yeah.
the issues don't just stop because they got out. It's lifelong healing, and there's all these aspects to it. And there's a bunch of parts that would make you cry, but I tell you, the wins are so great. They're better than any business win. I'm a real diehard snowboarder. They're better than the best day in the deepest powder snowboarding. The highs are so high, it's its own reward.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what happens with giving, is that when people give well, they experience those highs, and that's why in the biblical understanding and in modern social science and modern life, just giving is a joy, because just the ability to know that you've alleviated suffering, saved lives, or created opportunities for the poor. I mean, it's a great joy, and and you're certainly doing it. Wow.
So I want to talk about the causes that you're involved in. So tell me again where you grew up.
New Jersey, Short Hills, New Jersey.
Okay. And the volunteer first responders in Israel, like, where did that come from?
It was really all Ellie Beer's idea. And Ellie had grown up in Jerusalem, and he, as a very young man, he was volunteering in on the ambulance service, and he realized that he never got to save anyone's life in something like 2 years. And the reason why he never got to save anyone's life is because he always got there too late. And this wasn't a characteristic of that ambulance service at all. It's just how ambulance services work in general. Even today, in the most advanced cities, an ambulance will get to the victim in 10 minutes. And if the victim is upstairs, say in an apartment building or an office building, add another 4. So between 10 and 14 minutes, it's just too late for somebody who's choking, bleeding, having a heart attack or a stroke. And Ellie's insight, more than 25 years ago, his insight was that when you call 911, perhaps pursuant to a bleeding incident, heart attack, stroke, choking, drowning, you don't need an ambulance right away. You need a trained and equipped responder right away. And there are trained and equipped responders, or there are people who could become trained and equipped first responders in every community. And Ellie's insight was that if you recruit volunteers, you train them in everything needed to save a life, and right now it's full EMT training, and then you give them all the equipment, and there's a lot of equipment, and that's why we have to raise so much money. And there's a lot of equipment that they need for any kind of circumstance, anything from a sudden birth to a burn to an EpiPen. No matter what it is, the volunteers got to be ready to help the victim. Ellie just realized that if we could get to people who call 911 within 3 minutes and now down to 90 seconds, could save a lot of people who would otherwise die waiting for an ambulance. Then the ambulance can come 10 minutes later, and the people on the ambulance can continue the treatment and can evacuate the patient.
That's incredible. So how many years has it been going?
We started around 22 years ago. We just had our big New York event last night. But yeah, it's been about 22 years right now. And we're now doing about 2,300 calls a day and have 8,000 volunteers from all over Israel, every sector of Israeli society, from more observant Jews, more secular Jews, Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, Druze, everybody.
That's incredible. And so logistically, how does that work? What's the Israeli version of 911? How does this get to them versus the ambulance, or both? Or help us through that.
Yeah. So in Israel, someone calls the emergency number, and all of our volunteers have, of course, a GPS-enabled device on their person. And so what our dispatch center does is it immediately locates the closest trained and equipped first responders. And so the first responder might be somebody in the middle of the night who's asleep 3 floors up. It might be someone working in an office building around the corner. It might be someone having dinner at a restaurant across the street. Whatever it is, we locate the trained and equipped first responders, the volunteers in our network, and dispatch them to the scene immediately. And then they get to the victim immediately and begin treatment with the equipment that we've provided them, and they will always have on them. They always have it on them because they never know when they're going to need it. And the volunteers in the city will often get an ambucycle, a medically equipped motorcycle, because motorcycles can obviously cut through traffic a lot faster than cars. And as Jay Leno often says about United Hatzalah, thanks to Ellie Beer, now Jewish mothers love motorcycles. And yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, that's Jay's line. And but in the Negev desert or in the less populated areas, cars are just as good. But our goal is just to get to the victim in those 3 minutes to separate life from death, 90 seconds whenever we can, and we're able to save a lot of people. If you're choking or drowning or bleeding out, you don't have a heart attack. You don't have a lot of time. You certainly don't have 10 minutes. But if we can get someone there who's trained and equipped and ready for anything, and all of our volunteers have to be ready for anything, we have a good chance at helping.
I had a Army Special Forces medic saved my life one day in 2013, and fast response was such a key.
Oh wow!
Out in the desert, and so just for clarity, what's the emergency number in Israel?
1221.
Okay,
that's the United Hatzalah number in Israel. Yeah.
Okay, so do people know they need to call that, or what's the one to call, like a government or like a regular ambulance?
So the government number is 101. Our number is 1221. But whichever number someone calls, the call should be routed to us. And our goal is to have somebody there immediately, and then it's called MADA. They'll get there soon as well, or they'll get there a little later. They're full of terrific medics and volunteers as well, and but our goal is all about fast and effective response, and our goal is to bring this around the world so that just like you, that incident in 2013 where you were saved by immediate treatment, we think everybody should be.
Yeah. So working with governments and bureaucracies can be so challenging for people outside the system, for nonprofits, business people. Any advice? Because there's a lot of times in my experience, whether it's law enforcement or others, where they can be like, hey, that's our job, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly, it's been our goal and our dream to bring this out in the United States for many years, because no matter how advanced or how populated the city is, it takes 10 minutes on average for an ambulance to get to a victim. In rural areas, it takes longer, not because of traffic, but just because of distance. And one of the reasons why we really have not succeeded, is it has not been welcomed by governments. For no good reason. I mean, everyone's honest about the response times. It's just, and America would be a great place to roll this out because America has a volunteer culture. America has local funding capacity. America has a great volunteer culture. I mean, this country is amazing for so many reasons. One of which is that there are so many people who are excited to rise up and help their fellow citizens in any kind of need. And so, no, we'd love to roll it out here, but it has to partner with the 911 system. Right, because someone who's having a heart attack or a stroke or in a car accident is going to call 911, and so it has to partner with the 911 system for this to work.
I mean, it seems incredible. My business partner of the last 20 years, my brother, was in a snowmobile accident when he was maybe 14. Got thrown into a barbed wire fence and it slit his throat, cut his jugular, and from his carotid. And we have a volunteer fire department, volunteer ambulance in our little 3,500 person farm town in Western Canada. And, total miracle, but they had just picked up somebody who'd passed away at the pool hall and they were just pulling back into the fire station. They got the call and they were out of, it's a few miles out of town. They were out there incredibly quickly and saved his life. It was negative 30 or outside. So the shutting down his extremities. There's a whole bunch of reasons that was unlikely to be alive and is. But just this year, my son and I I'm down in Park City, Utah area, and we were out snowmobile in the backcountry, had a coolant problem. We were in the middle of nowhere. So I called a friend to hop on his snowmobile and bring us out, and he got lost. And it went on for enough hours that he should have been able to hike to the top of one of the peaks and call us. There's enough cell reception out there. So you're pretty sure he's either really hurt or maybe he's passed away. And that was some of the most anxiety I've had in many, many years
Yeah.
a handful of months ago. And we have a volunteer search and rescue service out here, and that works with the sheriff. And they got on their snowmobiles and they got out there. And man, we were so grateful. There was a helicopter coming back from another place that ended up spotting him in the dark. And he'd kind of been across country in it instead of on the trail. And he's out there slugging through snow up to his waist, very slow going. And he ended up being okay. But man, was I grateful for those search and rescue people finding him, because he wasn't really, he didn't have the equipment to spend the night. And we do have some volunteer things. It'd be greater if they could go
Absolutely.
past that to the level you're talking about.
You're totally right. We have plenty of volunteer things in America, but they're just not coordinated this way. I mean, yeah, it's I was going to say frustration, I guess you can call it that, but it's really our goal and dream that this Israeli system, which is working so well in Israel. I mean, 2,300 calls a day, 8,000 volunteers. I mean, this could be deployed in the U.S. and someone who calls 911 in the U.S., the odds should be very high that they would have their neighbor who's in a similar system to the one we have in Israel, who's trained and equipped at their side, whether it's helping deliver the baby, helping stop the bleed, helping dislodge the item from the throat of choking, helping the baby who's drowning, whatever it is. Like there are terrible things that happen all the time, and they don't have to end bad, right? Because there can be a trained and equipped first responder who's right there, and all kinds of things.
I've got an idea for you.
Yeah.
The reason that we have our, classified, like our most elite counterterrorism unit in America, the, commonly referred to as Delta Force, even though that's not their name, right? Is because we sent some Americans somewhere else. U.S. Army colonel went over and hung out with the Brits and was integrated into 22 SAS and realized, oh, wow, they've got something we don't. And he just experienced it viscerally and came back to America. He's got a great book. It took him years and years and years, but he had such a deep personal conviction, and he was inside the system, that eventually we got Delta Force. It'd be great to get some American politicians, American police chiefs, American, 911 leaders, choose some trips over there and spend some time with your folks in country.
But that's a good point. So about 2 years ago, Lieutenant Governor of Iowa, Adam Gregg, was in our headquarters in Jerusalem. And he said, he called me afterwards. He said, I really felt inspired by my Christian faith. He said, he said, I feel called and inspired to bring this to Iowa. And he did. And so we're having a rollout now in Iowa. And so Iowa is really the first place it's taking hold because of the leadership of Adam Gregg and the people who succeeded him. But God bless Adam Gregg. And but it was exactly that, Jess. He saw it firsthand, because in our headquarters in Jerusalem, you can see everything. You meet the volunteers, you see the dispatch center, you see all the equipment, and you get to see how it's working in real time, because you could see in the dispatch center call coming in, what the problem is, and then how quickly the volunteer gets to the victim. And you could say, wow, we need that here, whether it's Iowa or New York City, wherever it is. But the problems in the U.S. are not technological. They're not financial. They're certainly not cultural. America is a great volunteer culture. They're political.
Yeah. Well, for the entrepreneurs and fund managers listening today, let's go back to the this promise from the Bible again. Regardless of your religion or not religion, it is. I don't know. I think about I'm a churchy guy. I think about that idea from the Bible of you're going to harvest what you plant. And spending my years in a farm town that our family had been in since the 1890s, that is very much you get to see that in real life. But it is this concept of generosity and love and connection, and you kind of what goes around comes around.
Well, and for very rational reasons. I mean, so that was kind of the astonishing thing I found in my research into thinking, is this biblical guarantee true? And the answer was, yes, true for very, very rational reasons, that people want to do business with those that they know, like, and trust. And people know, like, and trust those who share a charitable commitment with them. It's really that simple. The Bible is totally right. And then it was actually interesting, because some of the secular literature, the contemporary secular literature I quote, said, whoa, it's kind of amazing that those who are charitable end up doing much more, they end up doing much better financially than those who are not. They said must be something magical or mystical about this. I have that quote in the book, and it's like, no. There's nothing magical or mystical about it. It's quite logical. And so I would say to anybody certainly getting started in business, but also at any other phase in business, and business could be broadly defined. It's like some people might say, I can't afford to give yet, to which what the Bible and the social science and the logic would say, well, no, you actually can't afford not to give, because if you give, you will become wealthier. In other words, giving is counterintuitively maybe the best financial investment you'll ever make. And I also
it's
say,
so counterintuitive, right?
Totally counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive because normally you say if I give something, I have one less of it and the other guy has one more, right? But the Bible says when it comes to giving generously and enthusiastically to the poor, that's not the case. And modern social science and experience confirms it.
I've seen that firsthand. With my day job, running this, being the CEO of Connection Estates, our portfolio management for luxury real estate homes, right? I met this great guy. We've had him on the podcast, Alistair Callender. Okay. He manages some of the biggest yachts in North America. The company Moravia Yachting out of Monaco is like 160 years old. And he is really, really involved in helping his clients' charities, especially ones around the ocean and around trafficking. And I got him to come out to one of my dinner parties in New York maybe a month ago. And now he sends me a referral once a week. Hey, you got to meet this great person who cares about trafficking. Oh, you got to meet this great person who cares about trafficking. Yeah. And he's been so generous, and I'm like a huge recipient of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is exactly what charitable engagement and philanthropic involvement can do. Is it builds these relationships. And the nature of relationships is that they might start about one thing, but then they quickly become about something additional, not something else, but something additional. And that's often what happens, is that relationships may start in a philanthropic context, but then you have a business need or opportunity or desire. And who do you reach out to? The person you know, like, and trust. And that's the person you're in charity with. So it totally works.
Yeah. Can you tell us one of your examples of, whether it's a client, an expert for the thing, somebody in your investment club that it started on this side, and then you become friends, and then you end up doing the multiple things together, including business?
It happens all the time. Exactly. I mean, so, take 3i Members. So we started 3i Members about 3 years ago. And the reason why I started it was because I asked the question, where did the best deals that I had done in the previous several years come from? And by best deals, I specifically excluded venture opportunities where you might get lucky once in a while, but you lose most of the time, and focused on the kind of esoteric opportunities that yielded had an IRR somewhere between 20 and 40% and had no drama. And I realized these were always hard to come by, and but you got them, but they were serendipitous. It was someone was thinking about you for whatever reason, or someone you ran into recently. And I said, well, how can this process, which is random, be systematized so that people can have regular access to non-correlated, high-yielding income opportunities that yield between, let's say, 20 and 40, and have no drama? And I said, well, they're hard to come by, but if you create a community of people who have sporadic access to these deals, then you'll have, then everyone will have consistent access to these deals. So we started as a platform to share deals, but and I know it's working very well. Just how prolific I am and some others are and many others are on the platform. But so a lot of the early members, people who joined when it was just a concept, were fellow United Hatzalah donors. A lot of them, just people who I have developed just great bonds of affection, trust, respect, and then they in turn brought in so many of their friends who were either in the Hatzalah community or not in the Hatzalah community, and then so many members of 3i have also become United Hatzalah donors. So it's just a great example of how when people know, like, and trust each other around either business or philanthropy, one's business and philanthropic lives become really wonderfully mixed. And you end up doing more philanthropy with those you respect in business and more business with those you respect in philanthropy. And it accrues to everyone's benefit. In this case, I think people are having a great experience in 3i. So people from the Hatzalah community who've joined 3i are having that great experience, and people who are in 3i who've learned about the Hatzalah have now had a great opportunity to save lives at such a low cost. So
That's incredible. So give us a little more background on the other two philanthropic organizations.
yeah, so African Mission Healthcare, I co-founded in 2010, and that's because my closest friend from college, John Fielder, in 2001 or so, he told me, as you know, I'm a Christian, and I feel called to go serve those who the Book of Matthew calls the least among us. And at that point, those were those who were suffering and often dying of HIV and AIDS, which was then ravaging Africa. And so John went to Africa as a Christian missionary physician, and he was one of the early HIV and AIDS doctors on the ground when PEPFAR was rolled out, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which has been so massively successful over 25 years. And so in the course of John's traveling throughout Africa with PEPFAR and other medical needs to help throughout Africa, what he realized is that probably the biggest humanitarian problem in the world is the lack of access to medical care for almost everybody in Africa. So whether it was HIV, whether it was a woman who was giving birth and needed a C-section, whether it was a child who was playing and broke her leg, whatever it is, there's just very little dependable health care. And so John said it doesn't have to be that way because there are people and institutions there who are doing great work and could do much more and much better work if they had the proper support. And the support does mean different things in different instances. And so he said these people were Christian missionary physicians. And my wife, who's a rabbi, and I have really been blessed to get to know so many Christian missionary physicians through John and AMH. And these are the best people in the world. These are the people that we want our children to grow up to be like. These are people who have moved to very difficult environments, usually at young ages, and often spend their whole lives there just in devotion to serving the poor and by providing healthcare and by growing healthcare, often through doing training or building infrastructure. And so, yeah, we started African Mission Healthcare in 2010, and we're now active in several dozen hospitals in about 17 countries, and we do lots of surgery, lots of maternal care, some HIV care. Our goal is that every African, whenever they're sick or they're injured, should have access to a hospital or a medical facility that they can depend on, just like you or I can. And so no matter what the condition, no matter what the illness, no matter what the injury, no matter what needs to be prevented, we just want to get to the place where everyone in Africa has access to a medical facility they can depend on. And what we've seen is that will be built through the Christian missionary sector. And so we're all about building the Christian missionary sector to ensure that everyone in Africa gets the access to medical care they need.
Yeah, it's inspiring what can be done when people just decide to take responsibility, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I got to hear, who's the guy who started Charity Water? Scott
Harrison.
Scott Harrison. I got to hear Scott Harrison talk at one of our peer-to-peer group, R360. He was down one of our Florida meetings speaking. And he's a pretty inspirational guy who just decided to turn his life around, decided he was going to get involved in helping people, and has had this big impact, right? But I was reading his book, and I don't think he has a religious background. And he said something about spending all his time in Africa, and he's like, a lot of my friends in New York, he's from New York, used to be a nightclub promoter, and he's a lot of my New York friends who, don't have a religious background. I don't think he came from one. They might not want to hear this, but I tell you, the people making the biggest difference in Africa that I saw are a bunch of Christian white ladies from the South out there, rolling up their sleeves, getting their hands dirty, and just, have just taken on heart and soul. And obviously, there's people from all faiths and backgrounds involved out there, but I thought it was interesting observation of his.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly right that the people who are the best people in the world we know are Christian missionary physicians, and these are people who have given of their entire lives to go serve the poor, and they do it because they're inspired by their faith, and they're missionaries because they're living as Jesus would want them to. And my wife's a rabbi, and we're very devoted Jews, and we say that what we've learned and observed from them has really made us better Jews and has helped us to become better Jewish parents. And these relationships have really nourished our lives. And I think people should look at philanthropy like an opportunity, not like a burden, but like an opportunity. I mean, being able to get into the right philanthropy is awesome. What a privilege! What a blessing! What an opportunity! I mean, the opportunity to be able to work with these Christian medical missionaries. I mean, the amount that they're doing on their budgets is astonishing. It would almost be unbelievable if I didn't know it so well. And I mean, just going through the numbers like we do all the time, I mean, it's astonishing on how much they do with how little. I mean, how little amount of money can save a woman in Uganda from either death in childbirth or the most devastating kind of birth injury to being able to return healthy to her family is just, I mean, the $300 and something. I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, that's just one example, but there's so many. And it's just a great opportunity and a great privilege to be involved with these sacred men and women, these Christian medical missionaries at African Mission Healthcare. And the ROI, I mean, we talk a little about ROI with deals. I mean, the ROI in supporting Christian medical missionaries is the best ROI in the world.
That's amazing. So I didn't think we were going to talk about so much about religion today. I thought we were going to talk about how to get experts to be part of your expert network. That's what I thought we were going to talk about today. But I'm loving where we're going. And so I have to tell you, my favorite philosopher, like probably the person that's had the biggest impact on my life outside of scriptures for me, is a Jewish Gnostic philosopher named Martin Buber. This guy who wrote I Am Now?
Sure.
And just this, like the way I sum it up is like the concept that most of our people problems at work, with investors, with clients, at home, it's like, it's not what we did or said, it's how we were thinking about them when we did it or said it.
That's a brilliant insight, Jess. Yeah, exactly.
Is this a person-to-person relationship where it's considerate, where I am functioning on the belief that you have needs and wants and cares? Or have I objectified you in some way? Are you almost like an I to an it, where I've labeled you in some way and as a result have discounted you in some way? And if I pay you a compliment, but I think you're a piece of dirt, humans have this great radar that like pretty quick, you're going to figure out I think you're a piece of dirt and it doesn't matter that I said a compliment, you're going to react to how I think. But if you love someone, like my wife is so great, okay? But sometimes she puts her foot in her mouth, okay? And we were at a restaurant with a bunch of our friends, and there's this girl, from Eastern Bloc country, very thick accent. And my wife says, "You talk so funny. Where are you from?" And everybody stops, including the waitress. Everybody freezes. They don't know what to say. And my wife doesn't realize what she said. And then the waitress starts laughing first because it was said with such love. Right. And then everybody laughs. My wife puts her hands in her face. But there was like, the love was so real that she wasn't offended at all. And it turned into this great conversation. I think she was from Latvia or something. And so anyways, for me, like even in my faith following Christ, I feel like that was like such a, there's this guy named Terry Warner who wrote this great book called Bonds That Make Us Free, largely based on that I ended up spending years of my life. I moved to a different country to work for Terry's company to follow this. So I want to dive into, I know we don't have a lot of time left. I want to dive into a couple of other principles from the Torah that can be helpful to those of us in business and investing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, so one is giving leads to wealth. So people who think that they don't have enough to give yet, the answer is you can't afford not to give. That's definitely true from the Torah. So what's another example that business people can derive from the Torah? Okay, well, let's look to there's only one person in the Torah who's called a success, and that's Joseph. And Joseph's called a success twice. So one might think, well, he's probably called a success when he's the viceroy of Egypt, because that's like the best job you could get in the world. The answer, nope. He did become the viceroy of Egypt, but that's not when he's called a success. He's called a success twice, once when he's a slave in Potiphar's home, and the second when he's a prisoner in Pharaoh's jail. So, well, what can we learn from that? Whenever we read a Torah passage, the Torah exists to teach us something that we can apply to our lives today to make us better, happier, more fulfilled, and to live more meaningfully. All right, so what can we learn from that? what we see is that success is not the job you have, but how well in the job that you do have, how well you do in the job that you do have. Okay, so what are the implications of that and how can it help business people? Well, Joseph, I argue in the book, was the first job crafter. He obviously, and this actually becomes really clear in Genesis, he obviously found joy and meaning in whatever job he had, even when he was in Potiphar's home and in the Pharaoh's jail. And how do we know that? Because Joseph is the Bible's God-saturated guy. Joseph is talking about God all the time, which is a proxy to saying that he's finding meaning in everything he does. And therefore, he's enjoying everything he does. So how could Joseph possibly enjoy the terrible situations that he's in? And it's explained by modern social science. So modern social scientists have this term called job crafting. And what is job crafting? Well, the example that these social scientists gave, who I believe they were the ones who invented the term in the early 2000s from University of Pennsylvania, was they used hospital custodians. And what they determined was that hospital custodians who see themselves as indispensable partners in the healing process do much better professionally. They make more money, they get promoted than people who saw themselves as just cleaning the room. And so what can we learn from the biblical Joseph is a couple things. One, it's really important to enjoy your work. Okay, and I have all the stats on this, and God was right as well, but you can't be a happy person unless you also are happy at your job. The most obvious explanation is that you spend so many hours at your job. If you're not happy in those hours, you can't be a happy person. But then the question is, how do you become a happy person? Well, we're guided by the biblical Joseph, and it's really job crafting. It's really everyone in any job can and should lead themselves, and crucially, to those who are business leaders, should lead their employees to realize the greater purpose and meaning of their work. A business leader should always want his or her employees to see themselves as building something important, which they are. Because anytime a customer or a client is parting with money for a good or service, there's some significant amount of value that's being created. And everybody in a company should regard themselves as indispensable parts of that value creation process. Just like Joseph did, just like the hospital custodians in the job crafting study did. And I think that business leaders should really make a special effort to guide their employees in that direction and to let them see the meaning in their work, because then their employees are going to be happier. All the studies about this have confirmed that happier employees are better employees, and the employees will be happier, better, and the company will prosper. And it's just a matter of allowing the employees to realize just how important their work is. So if someone's working in accounts receivable, you don't want that person thinking they're just processing paper, because they're not. What are they doing? They are collecting the revenue without which the company is going to close and everyone can just go home. Right? Without accounts receivable, let's just all shut the doors and go home. This could example after example after example, and each example is going to be true. And I think business leaders should really take a lesson from the biblical Joseph and just lead their employees in job crafting.
That's great. I love that. What's another one?
Okay, so how many hours a week should one work? Okay, so it's a question everyone asks to one extent or another, one degree or another. Well, the Bible says 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh you shall rest. Okay, so a lot of people think that's only about the Sabbath. Of course it's about the Sabbath, but what we learn from there is that the Sabbath, the seventh day, makes no sense unless that day of rest is preceded and followed by 6 days of work. So what do we learn there is that work is sacred, work is important. How many hours a week can someone following the Bible work? So if you follow the formula, 6 days you shall work, the seventh you shall rest, how many hours a week does that impute being able to work? It's really simple. Let's say you can work 10 hours a day. Okay. So you can work 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's 50. The problem is you can't work 10 hours a day on the sixth day because you also have to prepare for the Sabbath. You're not allowed to walk into Sabbath, you prepare for the Sabbath. So let's say you can work a half day on the sixth day, which is about right, by the way. 55 hours a week. Okay. That's the biblical claim about the optimal number of hours a week. The Bible says you can't work more than 55 hours a week. So say, all right, you say, look, I'm a logical guy, a rational guy, maybe even a secular guy. Let me see whether that's true. Okay, studies of the optimal number of hours to work a week, from machinists in World War I to Twitter employees in 2018, have determined that the optimal number of hours to week is 55. To the number. you work like 55 to 60, you're diminishing marginal returns. After 60, you start destroying the work you did in the previous 55, 60 or 65.
I will say that, like, maybe when I'm not relying on my faith as much and I'm not relying on wisdom, like the 80-20 principle of, like, where are the power law returns? What are the small number of things that have the big output? And I get anxious about work and I work, and I'm just like, I just stay at work all day. I, maybe I got to work at 7 or 8 and then I tell my wife, hey, I got to get this stuff done. And I work till midnight or 2 a.m. And it's like, those late hours are such a waste. When I get home,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I was so ineffective.
Exactly.
I may as well have just come home. And I told myself, no, I'm going to get up. And mind you, there's been times, we got to get this investment deck done. I stayed up the whole night and I did it. And there was I'm not saying it never pays off, but I will say it so rarely pays off, I may as well not do it at all.
Exactly. There's at the very least diminishing marginal returns, the very least. But what the Bible is teaching us is that, all right, so what's the antidote to that? Now, there are some days a week when you're going to have to work 10 or more hours, okay? The Bible is telling us, no problem, you just need the Sabbath. Like, if you take the Sabbath, if you put in that, and I don't care, the Bible doesn't care what religion you are. If you take the Sabbath one day a week and you say, on this one day, I'm not going to create, I'm just going to be. In other words, I'm going to engage in rest, but not rest in relaxation, but in rest as purposeful rest. So what do we observant Jews do on the Sabbath? We look forward to this all week. We have Shabbat dinner with our family, with our friends, where we pray, we thank God, we bless the food. Saturday morning, we study. You might engage in prayer. You might play games. A whole bunch of other kinds of things like this. You're not relaxing. You're engaging in purposeful rest. So why is it purposeful? Because what you're doing is you're renewing yourself so you'll be better at your job in the subsequent 6 days. I mean, just think about it. Like, would if we were painting a painting, would it be better if we kept painting it nonstop, or if we took a break, considered our work, and then went back to it later? Of course, the latter. And it's the same thing with any kind of work.
It's funny. If you think about the Bible, the Torah, from a non-faith perspective, just like the principles, like if you live the principles, even if you didn't have the faith,
exactly. So well put.
Like my brother and I's partner, he became my mentor in 2001, so 24 years ago this summer. And then about 2004, we got my brother to drop out of university and moved down from Canada to Southern California to work with us. And we've owned businesses and all this stuff since. Started the charity combating child trafficking, child rescue stuff. And I remember after about, I don't know, a dozen years of this, he told me, because there's a bunch of members of my church that we ended up hiring and stuff. And so, like, even though they weren't all, there was enough of a dominance of it, and definitely the leadership level, that he ended up telling me, he's like, because he'd worked, so he has big real estate portfolios on the businesses and stuff. He'd kind of worked 7 days a week, came from an entrepreneur family. And he ended up telling me about a dozen years in, like, he's like, I got to tell you, I've never really said this, but like, I actually really like that you guys refuse to work on the Sabbath, because you've kind of forced me to. And like, I just didn't have that before. And it's like become really something I look forward to. And,
and that's so beautifully put, Jess. And that's actually part of Sabbath observance. I have this in God Was Right. Part of Sabbath observance is you have to anticipate the Sabbath. And I go through the science of anticipation. And that's why in the Hebrew calendar, it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We count the days towards Shabbat in anticipation. So we look forward to it. We anticipate the Sabbath. But the 6 days you shall work and the seventh you shall rest. It's a system, right? You need the 6 days and it's not, by the way, it's not 6 days work shall be done. It's 6 days you shall work. So there's value to the work independent of its output, right? There's value to the worker independent of what he or she is doing. So 6 days you shall work, the seventh you shall rest. So if you're not working 6 days, what are you resting from? And if you're resting, what's the purpose? Well, there are a couple purposes, but one of the main purposes is to do better at your job in the next 6 days as a creator. So, and 55 hours a week, I just found it amazing that modern social science has confirmed to the hour, the amount that we should work a week.
That's wild. And again, I have so many friends that don't have a faith background. I've got really great Muslim friends, Hindu friends. I don't have as many Buddhist friends. I don't know why, it just has panned out that way. But I'll tell you something that relates to this that I have loved from Buddhism is this concept that work can be a form of love for others, that work can be expressing love. Instead of like something to get done, instead of something to like hurry up and finish so that you can have your life, this idea of like thinking about work in terms of service to others as a form of love. And it really helped me with my, I'm kind of an ambitious guy. I can be one track mind. It's caused me problems at home. It's caused me all sorts of problems to like sometimes get over focused on it. And so at times I've resented it too, even though I'm the one doing it. And I don't know if you feel like there's any relationship there, but that's one that kind of helped me with my perspective of, for the 55 hours, why am I doing there? What am I doing there? And can I embrace this idea of it being a form of love to others?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think that the Torah doesn't really use the term love to describe work, but it certainly, it's saying that work is an indispensable part of the life of a person of dignity. And it's just essential to one's dignity. And by the way, work does not have to be paid labor. Someone who cares for his or her child or grandchildren, they're working. So what does it mean to work? It means to be dependent on to do something productive, right? Doesn't have to be paid. The volunteers that we talked about at United Hatzalah, that's work, right? They're dependent on. No, it's not their job. They're all volunteers, but it's work. The point is, the Torah, and also the Torah doesn't say 6 days you shall work until the age of 68, in which case you retire. No. There's no notion of retirement, right? There's no notion of retire. It's what our dear late friend, Dr. Ruth, who was such a great American, great person, real Jewish hero. She'd come over for Shabbat most weeks. And Dr. Ruth used to say, you cannot retire. You can rewire, but you cannot retire. And
look at Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett.
Exactly.
So sharp into their 90s. Because like you said, they actually enjoyed what they were doing. And it's like, well, why would I stop doing this? It's so much fun.
Right. And if you're physically incapable, we're all physically incapable of doing things we did when we were younger, right? No problem. Just do something. But particularly in America, which is such an amazing country for so many reasons, there's always something else to do that's productive, right? That doesn't rely upon what you were able to do before. So, no, the Bible says 6 days you shall work, the seventh you shall rest. The thing works totally in the system. And the other thing I would say is people who say in business, crazy busy, it's like, whoa, then you're doing something wrong, right? It's 55 hours a week. If you say you're crazy busy, you're telling me you're working more than 55 hours a week, in which case I'm concerned about you. So,
yeah. Okay. So if you have just another minute, I want to ask about something. I have such admiration for people who have paid the price to get really good at connecting others to each other.
Yeah.
And, it certainly appears you've done that in your businesses and your charity work. And can you talk about the principles specifically when it comes to high profile or high net worth people and maybe like a rookie mistake? What's a rookie mistake you see when people are trying to work with that population to begin with?
Oh, well, first, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of connecting people, I think it connecting people well, such a good question. I'm just thinking about it for a moment. But I think in terms of connecting people well, the first thing one has to do is to immediately think to the point where it becomes intuitive and natural, which is to say, this person is really interesting. They're doing some important things. Who do I know or what do I know that can enhance his life and improve those things? And once someone has that mentality, that's a great start. And I think people who find others interesting, people who are inspired by the great work that others are doing, whether it's commercial. And by the way, as we said, great work in business is great work, period. Right? Or great work in charity. People who are find people interesting and are inspired by great things others are doing and therefore want to help them. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of value that can be added.
I love it.
And certainly not even in a business or philanthropic context. I think more people should think like if I meet a young man or woman who's single, it's like, get in your head or have a personal CRM. Like, all right, who do I know that I can set them up with? I mean, the marriage is the best thing in the world. The easier, the quicker you can help get someone married, the better.
I love it.
I mean, how sad is it? Like, how it's terrible. Like, if you meet a young man or woman who's not married, and like in your head or in your system or what should be your system that there's someone else that could be right for him or her, but you don't make the connection. That's bad. Make the connection.
I will say, I like, like, I was like crying for joy. One of my really, really good friends, in our community, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people get married young, okay, in general, right? I got married 23 years ago. I was like 21 years old. We'd known each other for like 4 months, got engaged, got married a month later, 23 years ago, right? So it's even more pronounced in our community. And one of my really just best friends, such a charming guy. I think, I know for a fact my wife and my sister-in-law had like married crushes on him. We're just like such a good, chivalrous, opening doors, funny. And he finally got married at 52, and to a woman who just loved him so much. And it was just like, I just had wanted that for him so much for so long. I was just so happy when he finally got it. It's like, I don't know. It was like a different kind of happiness to celebrate his happiness.
Well, yeah, I have a chapter in the book on the formulas for successful dating from the Torah. So, it's been like everything else proven right by modern social science. So,
well, my daughter just got back from a 1.5-year service mission, so I think that's maybe the next chapter in her life. So,
wow, God willing.
Yeah. Listen, tell us the websites. Where can people buy the book? How can people follow you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, godwasright.com. And anybody wants to discuss African Mission Healthcare, United Hatzalah, just email me at mark@godwasright.com.
And is there an audiobook of it yet?
Yes.
Okay. Can we get that on Audible or where's
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The godwasright.com links to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all that.
Okay. I love it. Listen, you've been so generous with your time. Congratulations on all your success. What do you want to leave people with today?
Well, first, just gratitude to you for this remarkable podcast and for having me on. And I think if there's one thing I could leave people with, it's the biblical wisdom from Deuteronomy 15:10, which is that if you give generously, enthusiastically to the poor, you will be blessed in all of your undertaking. Which is also, by the way, in the description of the tabernacle. God doesn't say you shall give a contribution, but you shall take a contribution. Very strange. What do you mean take a contribution? Because when you actually give to a sacred cause, you're actually taking. So the Bible always gets it totally right. So that's a slight aside, Jess, but what do I want people to take away? I suppose one thing is just take away Deuteronomy 15:10. If you give generously, enthusiastically to the poor, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings. And if there's a second thing, it's that the Bible is the most interesting, relevant, and applicable guidebook ever written, right there for our benefit. We just have to know how to read it. And I hope I was able, and God was right, to distill some of those lessons.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, bye, everyone.